Hey everybody, welcome to Bura Tech. In this episode, we're going to be asking the question, should Apple change its policy and get ahead of the game? Alright, welcome back. Before we start this video, I want to make sure that you like and subscribe. The more likes and subscribers we get, the more content we can make. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about Apple and Epic. And of course, this is really hard for me because I like both companies quite well. I have a MacBook Pro and I love using the Unreal Engine. But I want to talk today about Apple and how they can possibly get ahead of the game. So as we know, a lot of these tech companies are entering into these legal situations where they might be considered monopolies. Now, the monopoly case against Apple is the App Store, its frigid rules, and its services that is competing with other companies. Now, personally, I don't think Epic has as good of a case with Fortnite, but Spotify really does because Apple Music doesn't have to pay the 30%, but Spotify does. So I think things are gonna have to change. And if I were Apple, I might want to get ahead of the game and just change the policies. Now, in addition to all of the items that have been happening, Russia might force Apple to give developers 20%. Now, of course, this is interesting because Russia is, of course, a very big market and it would deal a pretty big blow to Apple. So if Russia forces Apple to give 20%, what's stopping Germany, South Africa, the United States, or maybe even Australia, New Zealand, any other country that can force Apple to do the same thing? So it looks like the court of public opinion is shifting against Apple. And while Apple may be technically correct, it might lead to some further problems for the company down the road. So one of the things that they could do is they could just say, you know what? I'm going to give developers 20%. We're going to cut that 10% and leave exactly everything the same. That way, Apple can do what it does and nothing really changes. So what Apple could say is that they're going to take 20% instead of 30%, and everything else stays the same. Now, I think there's a lot of people that would shift to Apple's side. What has happened is that Apple will have received some feedback and they've made a reaction. So the worst possible thing for Apple is if the governments and court decisions make the iOS platform more open, that completely changes the company and it frankly changes the iPhone too. But if they just concede maybe on 10%, then it might be seen as a concession and therefore everything else stays the same. So if they got ahead of the game and they just did this, I think they would like it the most. Now, of course, to complicate things, Apple has given Amazon a 15% cut instead of the 30%, which I don't think was the right move. Because what makes Amazon different from all the other developers? Well, it's actually quite simple. Amazon is huge and indie developers and Epic aren't as big. Now, I personally think the answer to all of this is for Apple to give a sliding scale. So the more money a developer makes, the less they take, from 30% all the way down to 10%. Now remember, if you are a developer and you really don't like the Apple tax, there's a lot of work that needs to go into the App Store, and not to mention transaction costs. If you've ever run a business, you'll realize that transaction costs are a huge part of the business. So if you've ever run a business, transaction costs really do eat into the bottom line. And of course, maybe Apple has some better deals with the credit card companies, but it is an item on their sheet and it does soak up a lot of money. So even if Apple wanted to take 5%, the transaction costs might put it up to 8% coming out of your pocket anyway. So I think 30% down to 10%, and maybe even in some cases where there's a lot of revenue, maybe even down to 8%. Now, of course, this is my personal opinion, but I think Apple should really get ahead of this. If governments are putting pressure on the App Store and courts in different countries are putting pressure on the App Store, it's better to just change now and get ahead of the game, and maybe even kick the can down the road. What Apple really risks now is a complete change to their entire platform, and this is something that they don't want to do. It's a possible future where Apple is forbidden to offer services like Spotify or other services on the App Store. This video is recorded on an iPhone, by the way, and frankly, as an iPhone user, I don't want to be downloading 10 different camera apps. I want to be downloading the one that makes most sense for Apple, and there needs to be some Apple native apps, and I completely agree with that. So Apple does have a case for usability, but the zeitgeist of today is that all these big tech companies are being put under the microscope to see if they're being anti-competitive or monopolistic. So if Apple gets ahead of the game, then they might come out of this mostly unscathed. So that concludes this video. I want to know your comments down below. Should Apple get ahead of the game? Is Apple in the right? Is Epic in the wrong? Let me know. I want to read your comments down below. Remember, this channel doesn't do a Patreon, and instead we sell our digital products down below. The more money we get from the content that you buy below, the more content we can make. And our goal from Mammoth Interactive is to get to 10,000 monthly subscribers. If you really like this channel, you can subscribe to Mammoth Interactive's huge library of content. We release 20 to 60 hours of fresh new content per month every month. We release everything from Excel tutorials to machine learning tutorials to game development tutorials and more. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in another video.